You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Holt.
Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Good, man. How are you?
Awesome. Jasmine, how are you?
Good. How are you guys?
Good.
We're doing great.
So I was driving into the studio today,
Yeah.
and, a couple of years ago, Starbucks started doing, the order ahead app. So you can order ahead and go pick it up, which is really cool.
Yep.
But today I was listening, and now they've launched a nationwide service with Uber where you can order Starbucks coffee and Uber Eats will deliver it to your office.
Are you kidding me?
So you don't even have to walk out. So
my gosh.
if you've got meetings back to back to back and you can't get out to get your fix, and I'm not talking drugs, I'm talking caffeine, folks.
Same thing.
Then you can do
exactly.
Then you can do Uber Eats and it's delivered. Now I think this is just we always say in the age of Amazon,
right.
but it is in the
Right.
age of Amazon. Expectation has changed, and so Starbucks is doing this. And my guess is a lot of people will be using this because the delivery charge is something like $3, right? So if you get your whole office to do it and
Right.
ship in, then it makes
There you
sense.
go. That does make sense.
But some people need their fix, so
I
they
know.
got to have it, right?
Isn't it weird? There was a time when delivery was only for pizza, and that's it.
Right.
Like
Isn't it
avoid
strange
the
there was
noise.
a time where you had to make your own pot of coffee and it always burned because the coffee
and
pot
you
sucked.
didn't drink
and
it all. You only drank a
Exactly.
little, and you wasted a bunch.
Exactly.
Man, them days are over.
That's right.
I'm digging it, man.
It's interesting, but that's the world we live in.
Yeah.
And one of the most important parts of business today is supply chains.
Yeah.
And we've had some conversations about that from here and there. But what's really interesting is not just, we can look insularly and look at our members in our industry and what they're doing. But
Yeah.
I always think it's super interesting to look outside.
Big time.
So we brought in an expert to help us out.
We did, and this is kind of a podcast crossover because this expert is not just an expert; she's also a podcaster, and that's Sarah Barnes-Humphrey, who is a supply chain expert, podcaster, disruptor, entrepreneur, inventor, investor. I mean, she's all these things, and she is, for our purposes, also the host of Let's Talk Supply Chain,
right?
Which is, speaking of fixes, is your weekly supply chain fix.
That's
Sarah,
right.
welcome to the Shoe and Show. We are happy to have you on.
Thank you, guys. I am super happy to be here. It's great. And I love what you were talking about Starbucks because that's all about supply chain, right?
Exactly.
Now they're delivering your coffee fix to you by Uber Eats. I mean, how much better can it get than that?
This feels like when the moment before Rome falls for some reason. I don't know. It can't get any better. But Sarah, walk us through who you are, what your background is, and kind of set the stage for this conversation.
Plug your podcasts.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I have been in supply chain logistics for over 20 years, worked for a private 3PL just outside of Toronto. And I ended up as director of sales and marketing, and just taking a look at what was out there for supply chain and marketing, was kind of, not very exciting. And I decided that after years in sales and talking to shippers and looking at what different freight forwarders were doing, I decided to start this podcast. And I wanted to make a bit of a splash in the industry, and I wanted to get some attention. So I called it Two Babes Talk Supply Chain.
All right.
Nice.
And and I had a male co-host, which made it kind of funny. And that's how the podcast started. And we just started interviewing people and finding out so many amazing things that people were doing in the industry. And then eventually I took it over myself, and I started a Woman in Supply Chain series that people are really starting to get behind. They love this series. They love hearing from women in supply chain. But the women in supply chain didn't like my Two Babes Talk Supply Chain name.
Yeah, they weren't happy with that, were they?
No. So I rebranded the show within a week, which I don't suggest anybody to do because that's almost like marketing suicide. But I did it, and I came out the other end, and it has just been great ever since.
That's awesome. And how long have you been doing this? How many episodes do you have in the bank?
Oof, I think season 1 we were up to 68, and now season 2 I just released number 52, but I have up to 75 in the pipeline right now.
Wow.
That's unbelievable. We do these on the fly, so like we don't even have one published today, and we're trying to get it out. So we're the exact opposite.
Well, it's the Woman in Supply Chain series. Everybody loves it. They want to recommend a woman in supply chain that's making a difference
That's
and is
awesome.
a trailblazer so I had to actually extend it into a blog. And I'm booked for the podcast until December in that series, and I'm booked in the blog till September.
Wow.
That is amazing. And it's all industries, right?
Yeah, and it's global. Like in March, I'm going to have a lady from South Africa who's come against all odds that is trailblazing in a male-dominated industry, a male-dominated culture, and people are now coming to her to ask questions.
That's great. That's wonderful. I mean, that's exactly what you want, right? I mean, I think when we talk about supply chains, I think we probably think of, 50 years ago when it was an all-male kind of cohort running supply chains or whatever, and now you've got a big diverse group of people all over the world, and I love the fact that you're giving a platform for women in a job that may be seen as male. And in one sense, kind of educating people in the industry, about the benefits of having a woman in the position, and then also helping give a catalog to people who are getting into supply chain and encouraging young women to get into the field.
Yeah, and really helping those women sort of navigate their career and giving them advice and like showing that the path is never straight. Different things happen along that path, things
Right.
that you couldn't even think about. I mean, I can tell you 5 years ago, I did not think I was going to be a podcast host.
Well, so like walk us through some of your highlights, and we'll get to trends in supply chain in a minute. But beyond the South Africa one, are there some like concurrent themes that are coming together, or are there things that have stood out to you that are unique for the female experience within supply chain management? Give us some of the kind of gold nuggets you found in this process.
Yeah, so they all come with very different backgrounds, very different stories, and very different advice, which I really, really like, because then you get a diverse idea of, what success looks like to them, what advice would help one lady over another maybe looking to do that in their career. So, Catherine Cooper coming on the show talking about not keeping score as a woman. If you're not playing golf and you're not on the golf course, find other ways from a sales standpoint to get in front of those customers and win over those customers. Heather from Uber, she was on the show with Stacy from Women in Logistics. That journey is never straight, like I mentioned before. Taking risks. A lot of them do talk about taking risks and the importance of doing that. Giving back through mentorship. A lot of the women that I'm talking to are giving back to the community through mentorship, which is amazing. Irina Roska, she talks about supply chain being a game of chess. And then Lori Benson, to me, she's the queen of diversity and she talks about the importance of diversity and why we need diversity and what it means for unconscious bias and so many incredible things within, a business that we don't even really think about that we should start thinking about now.
That's awesome, man. You took us around the world. You were all set for that question. That's awesome. You are a professional. So let me ask you this. What are some of the trends that you're seeing when it comes to supply chain? Are there things that, you talked about diversity, innovation is something that's really driving a lot of things. What else is out there that we need to be aware of?
Sustainability.
Okay.
A
Yeah.
lot of people are talking about sustainability. So I recently reached out to my community and I asked them, what would you ask a CEO of an ocean carrier? And a lot of them came back and said, what are you doing about sustainability? What are you doing to save our planet? I also just recently did an interview with the Port of Long Beach, and I didn't realize how much they were doing in sustainability to really give back to the community and really, talk about how they're saving the planet. And I think they were going to like zero emissions by a certain year or something like that. But sustainability is a really hot topic, and people really want to know what companies and corporations are doing to back that up.
Yeah.
I mean, we're the same way. I think in our industry, you've got a lot of people who are talking about sustainable products, sustainable materials, sustainable production, zero waste, kind of recycling, things like that. I mean, we've even been working on a platform for the past couple of years called a material exchange that, for the footwear industry and also apparel and any kind of industry you're doing leather or fabrics, like furniture or something like that. They all use these traditional swatch books where a material supplier will, cut pieces of their material, put it in a book and ship it all over the world. And what we're trying to do is digitize that to where those images are on a site and designers and developers can look at that ahead of time and actually make better choices so that it helps the supplier, obviously do less of those physical books. They may still do it, but less of those. And then also it helps the supplier know what material to actually make so that there's tons and tons of materials wasted around the world every single year because there's just uncertainty and miscommunication. And even that kind of technology, the material exchange platform that we're building will help kind of deal with some of that and reduce supply chain and reduce waste in the supply chain. So even with our industry, we've got a lot of people trying to figure out what sustainability is and then how you actually make it happen. And it's not easy to enact, but it is more and more, like you say, more and more people want to know the story behind what you're doing.
Absolutely. And it's so important. I mean, look at the 3D printing model
right,
that people are talking about, shipping raw material versus finished goods.
Right.
Well, if you ship the raw material, there's so many more things that you can do with that if that material for that intended product might not be selling as well.
Mm.
One of the things, though, to be kind of a devil's advocate in some of this space is that the fact that like these perfect storms are converging and you have consumers who want access to product quicker. They want a kind of a constant stream of new product.
Right.
And as Andy was talking about material exchange, it reminded me of the importance of those kinds of programs. But at the same time, are you having to use air freight more often? Are you having to do things that may be actually more harmful to the environment in the name of speed? Or am I thinking about that wrong, Sarah? Is there speed actually allows us to be more efficient and allows us to be more sustainable? It's hard for me to kind of wrap my mind around it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point. I mean, a lot of consumer trends are going towards even custom, right? People want products to be made custom to them, depending on what that looks like. Is
right.
it, a word on there or what that looks like? But that, I think, is where that raw material comes in and where the manufacturing, where do we manufacture the product? Are we going to set up a small manufacturing space, here in North America and ship more raw material to be able to accommodate that speed? Because even with air freight, you've got delays. Even if it increases, there's only so much capacity that they have.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very true. It's very true. And the other thing is kind of how companies are thinking through how to be more sustainable. The question is, do consumers care? And we battle with this, the prevailing notion is that they do. Like the rising millennial really cares about sustainability. And they actually may, and I don't discredit that, but I feel like it often polls like other, here in the U.S., this Made in America polls really well. Most people would rather buy something made in the U.S. and outside of our borders. But the moment that it is more expensive, that it is not functional, that its colorway is not right, and if it's a pair of shoes, they're going to buy an imported item.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about sustainability and these companies push for it, to me it has to be driven by their desire to be more efficient and drive value to the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not consumers will dig it is a whole different dynamic. Consumers are fickle, and the moment that item is more costly is the moment they walk and go back to their normal kind of purchasing, behaviors.
Yeah, and maybe at some point, hopefully, one will win out over the other, and then we'll know.
What about when we talk about supply chains? I think there's, at least for me in the U.S. and also you being in Canada, I think we can bifurcate it, right? So one section of the supply chain is going from finished product overseas, importing that in and hitting landed. And then the second part of that is getting it from the port or warehouse to our retail location, or just to a warehouse where it drop ships to the consumer directly, right? So when we separate those two, where are we seeing the most innovation in supply chain from all the people you've talked to? From my standpoint, and maybe I'm just ignorant, but I think the first leg of that, we still see a lot of traditional shipping. Air freight is growing and changing, but it seems like the first part of that leg really is about efficiency, creating efficiencies, tracking, transparency, et cetera. And it seems like the second half of that leg, once it's here in the US or in Canada, getting it to that individual. From my vantage point, it seems like there's a lot of things happening with drones or, driverless trucks or all these different things people are toying with. So maybe unpackage that for us. What have you heard from different people across all these different industries? What are you seeing between the first leg and the second leg?
Yeah, I think I would agree with you on that, because the first leg really, you can only go as fast as your suppliers, right? Depending on where your suppliers are located around the world, globally, and how fast they're moving as far as, technology versus traditional.
Right.
I think there's companies like IMX that is starting to bring innovation into that space. But I think the innovation really is in that second leg. There's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of people trying to crack that space, whether it's, international shipping, air freight or ocean freight with different kind of innovative platforms. And then last mile, there's so many different options. Uber's in that space when it comes to, trucking and last mile delivery, and they're doing a lot in that space as well. And there's just so much more, I believe, opportunity at the moment and where that focus is.
Right. It just seems like there's so much more cool stuff happening when you start talking about drone delivery and all that. What about super big challenges in our supply chains today? We've talked a bit about sustainability and things like that, but where are the disruptions? I just saw the other day a major trucking company in the Northeast was going bankrupt, which already there's already a lack of supply of truck drivers in the U.S. that are doing cargo from warehouse to point A and point B. So, what from your vantage point, from what you hear from different people, what is something that's keeping people up at night with disruption to supply chains?
Well, that's definitely a key issue, is the driver shortage, and how are we going to overcome that? But from an international standpoint on the ocean and air freight, I feel like a lot of the innovation is focused on enterprise companies and focused on full container load, which is okay, but I think we're forgetting a big part of the market, and that's where my online platform is going to be focused on, is mid-market shippers, as well as freight forwarders. I think we are going to see some bankruptcies. I think we're going to see some consolidations, but as much as everybody, is talking about, freight forwarders and whether they're needed or not, I think they're still needed, especially for the small to mid-sized market. And I think there's going to be some disruption there and some innovation that we should pay attention to.
Yeah, Sarah, we talked, you were on a panel with us at one of our events last, a while back, and we talked about some of those innovative ideas that are kind of coming out. And there were some that you dropped on me that just went totally over my head. And I'm trying to thinking of the supply chain as as a commodity or some kind of, I'm trying to think like transitioning the supply chain into some kind of I don't know if you're tracking what I'm thinking about, but it was a company that was thinking through how to take the supply chain and make it in. It's not necessarily blockchain, but it's in that same kind of era. Is this ringing a bell to you at all?
Yeah, I think where you're going with that is almost the AI component. Bringing more AI into the logistics part of it, into the supply chain, to really be able to help, the mid-market shippers, the freight forwarders have more trust in each other, work well together, look at capacity issues, with air freight and ocean freight, and do some more predictions, where a lot of it is being done manual. I mean, it's all well and good with an enterprise company and a steamship line being able to, take a look at their volumes and be able to capitalize on that. But when it comes to freight forwarders and, again, the mid-market and the way that they handle their freight and how they handle the quotes and how they book it, et cetera, I think you're going to see, AI is going to make a big difference in that.
I mean, that if they can get some kind of like algorithm that actually looks at their product and looks at their distribution channel and can better inform them what to split, right? So if you're making a pair of tennis shoes and you're making a pair of leather shoes, using AI could inform you your tennis shoes should fly in because you need it quickly. Your inventory is low in the U.S. or Canada. Versus your leather shoes, you should ship on the steam line because your inventories are, what I'm saying? So all of a sudden it starts to inform your front end to your back end all the way through and kind of give you better options that you should think about. Versus, traditionally, if you've been doing supply chains for 30 years, it's really hard to think about something differently when you're getting good rates and you may not think of last mile issues or costs at that point, right? You're just thinking at the front end cost point. So if you can have some kind of system that helps just give you better options.
Yeah.
It'd be super cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're talking about smaller margins too for a lot of these companies, whether it's freight forwarders in that space or shippers in that space. So you got to be mindful of what they are spending their money on, what they're investing in, because they can only invest in so much. So how do you support them? How do you help them? How do you get to that point so that we can all become more efficient?
Well, let me ask you this. One of the things we all fly for a living, one of the things I've noticed, and I think others have, is that you never get on a flight anymore that's half empty. Everything is tight, jammed. It's like the airlines have made a science out of efficiency and capacity and having an exact number of flights or airplanes within their fleet to accommodate the demand. And so that leads to a lot less empty seats. And what I'm hearing, particularly from kind of smaller importers, is that there's not a lot of capacity out there to be had. Are the steam line, are folks getting better at figuring out the science behind, capacity, and are the smaller importers in particular have a lot less leverage maybe over than some of our larger importers? Are they the ones kind of on the receiving end of the challenge that comes with that kind of capacity optimization?
So did you notice that the seats got smaller? Because I definitely did.
Well, Matt did because he's like 8 foot tall. So when he's having to lift his knees above his head, used to he would just have to lift his knees to his chest, and now they're above his head. So
this is truth, man. This is truth.
And if you want any sort of leg room, you've got to pay, I don't even know, like $50 or $100 extra for that.
Right. You want to be comfortable? It's going to cost you.
Exactly. Maybe they're going to start doing the same with freight. I mean, who knows? But I think that as far as capacity, I mean, it kind of goes with what you were talking about as far as speed to market and speed to the consumer, with the consumer demands changing. I think that people will start looking at air freight because we're still in the mindset of shipping finished goods. And I think that as things change, I think, again, as we add in innovation, we add in predictability, we add in those AI components, you're going to see things shifting. Because they're going to be able to predict it a lot more. And I think they're starting to get there, right? They're really starting to take a look at those numbers, the data, so that they can really maximize on what they're doing. And you can't blame them. I mean, they spend a lot of money to stay up in the air, and they need to stay profitable.
Let me ask you about companies who deliver to people's houses and businesses. So FedEx, UPS, DHL in the U.S., still USPS, U.S. Postal Office. Recently, there's an online business called I think it's stamps.com or something like that, and they used to have exclusive partnership with the United States Postal Service to sell stamps and shipping supplies that they would then ship to offices and do it like that. And then just recently, that they ended their exclusive deal with USPS because they said that they're going to have to start working with Amazon, which made me wonder, maybe you've heard, I don't know, maybe you have any insights, but is Amazon in North America going to become the next FedEx that they're going to start creating? Not just, I've seen, Amazon trucks are going and delivering their own packages. They have their own kind of like mini fleet now, but they've got planes, they've got, trucks. There's been no official declaration that they're declaring that they're going to be a delivery service like this, but it seems like it's headed that way. What have you heard, or what do you think about that?
Well, I haven't heard too much, but what I would say is this. I think that it's a smart move on their part. I don't know. You probably don't keep up with Canadian last mile, Canada Post. But before the holidays, we recently had a strike, and it affected all of the Christmas presents being delivered.
Oh my gosh!
And they were backed up like 3 months in trucks, and it
terrible.
caused absolute chaos. Right before Christmas, and people weren't going to be able to get their Christmas presents to put under the tree and all sorts of stuff. But it brought up a really good point. If Canada Post here is the cheapest option to be able to deliver packages, because the next best is UPS, FedEx, or DHL, and they're 3 times as expensive. Mm-hmm. Canada Post is expensive, but they're very expensive. We kind of pigeonhole ourselves, and we put ourselves, in a spot with Canada Post where they can dictate in a consumer world how we're going to get our packages, when we're going to get our packages, and if they're not happy, we're not going to get our packages at all. Mm. And I think the same can be said for USPS. USPS is a lot cheaper than Canada Post, but again, if they are the cheapest option on the market and they're unionized and they decide to strike, and it's right before Christmas, you're going to disrupt a lot of people. And so, I think there needs to be competition, but I think them going to Amazon maybe will help keep the competition alive rather than just sticking with the USPS.
No.
Yeah, that's, I get nervous when you kind of put all your eggs in one basket when it comes to anything. And then that, competition's good, diversification is good, particularly for the consumer, because that just makes me nervous, and that's not innovative at all.
Well, that's the same thing we had with the port strike.
Yeah,
everybody was
true.
bringing in shoes on the West Coast because it was coming from Asia,
2015,
over into predominantly Port of LA, Port of Long Beach, some in Seattle, some in Tacoma, and then people started to look at Vancouver in Canada, try to bring something in because there was no strike happening there, and then they were looking at. Even Houston, and they were looking at Miami, and they were looking at New York, New Jersey, and I think that conversation is still happening. I think predominantly it's still West Coast because it's the efficiency to bring it in and all the warehousing there. But it did make people pause for a year or so and really reevaluate. So it sucks though, because you shouldn't be reevaluating in a chaotic moment, right?
Totally not.
So I think it's constant looking at your supply chains, and I'd love to know more about this AI stuff.
Yeah,
look more into that and see what predictive analysis and things like that. Sarah, what about you're looking ahead the next 12 to 24 months? What before we pivot to Jasmine and do her world famous Fashion Footwear and Focus segment, what really excites you? As you look forward, what really kind of whatever conversation you've had with folks or whatever companies are doing that's really, really cool and exciting, what's kind of a game changer? What's exciting you right now?
Diversity. I'm really looking to hear about, more women in the industry being trailblazers and making a difference. Not only in their companies, but in the community. I really like that. I also just recently read an article about how CEOs are going to be taken from supply chain.
Really?
As we move forward. And I think that is really exciting, because at the end of the day, the supply chain is tied to the customer experience. It's tied to the business success. And I think that it's a really exciting time that people are recognizing that supply chain is such an important feature of business and business success and business strategy. Supply chain should be collaborating with different departments in that company. And for people to recognize that the next CEOs will be coming to them with some sort of a supply chain background is super, super exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And it's the future in spite of kind of all the hiccups. There's just a lot to be excited about, and there's a lot of challenges out there, but
supply or die.
I like it. I like that. Supply or die.
That's a bit ominous. But
is it true? Yes, it is.
Oh my gosh. Well, with that, let's bring in Jasmine because supply chain is fashionable. Jasmine is fashionable. And we're about to find out what she thinks may or may not be fashionable in this week's Fashion Footwear in Focus segment. Jasmine, take it away.
Okay, so I'm not going to miss my opportunity to have another woman during this segment. So I'm going to get Sarah's opinion on some styles that I read were out. So first is the wedge boot. We're replacing that with a block heel. The second is a platform and a platform heel, and now we're going to a single sole. The third is a galley. I can't even pronounce it.
You can do it.
The sandals that go all the way up your leg, we're just gonna do a naked sandal is what they call flip-flops, and we're changing those over to slides. And peep toe shoes, we're changing those over to V-neck shoes. Now, Sarah, some of these things on this list that they're trying to get rid of, I'm definitely not getting rid of. But some of the other things I am all for. For instance, like flip-flops, I've definitely traded those in for slides. Do you have anything on like certain styles that you're never getting rid of, never stop wearing?
Yeah, I like the wedge.
Yeah,
I have
okay.
to say, though, I think the wedge is like here to stay. I have a few different styles, you know, the high boots, the short boots.
Mm-hmm.
As far as a pump, though, I don't like a wedge in a pump.
Yeah, okay. So
I like it in a boot.
Oh,
yeah.
What about a sneaker?
The sneaker, I do have one pair. I don't wear them very often, though. I like my, regular sneakers.
Yeah, and do you prefer the wedge boot because it's comfortable, or you just like the style? Why is that a preference for you?
Oh, both.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so much more comfortable, and I love the style. And I have to say, I don't think I'm ever going to go from flip-flops to slides.
Really?
Because, slides I feel like take a lot more effort to keep on my foot.
That's
Okay.
true. Very true. If I may interject, I don't know if I'm allowed, but
Of course.
Silence.
shut up.
But I have one question for you, though. What is the naked sandal?
So a naked sandal, I guess, is just one strap over your ankle and then one strap across your toes. So not like the straps going all the way up your leg.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'd never do that one either.
Yeah, I
would
don't
never
own any
do
of
the
those.
one all the way up my leg, and I would never do the naked sandal, and I'm sticking to my flip-flops.
Okay, I'm all for it. Cool. Well, thank you, Sarah.
There's no let's talk
Thank
naked.
you.
There's no let's talk naked sandal in your podcast in your future.
No, don't. I know I don't see that happening.
Cool. Well, Sarah, what's if people want to subscribe to your podcast? What's a website address that they can go look you up at?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk supplychain.com.
Well, that's simple.
That's
Let's talk
easy.
supplychain.com. Let's talk supplychain.com. Let's talk supplychain.com. Now they've got it. Great. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us
Thanks,
today
Sarah.
and kind of helping us think through supply chains and what's happening out there and best practices, because you do speak to a range of different folks in the industry. And congratulations on all the success you've had with your podcast and what you're trying to do to encourage diversity and encourage women in supply chains.
Oh, thank you so much, and thanks for having me on the show. It's been so much fun. You guys keep it so fun and lively, and congratulations to you guys on all your successes as well.
Thank
Thanks,
you very
Sarah.
much.
See ya.
Thank you. Folks, this is Shoe and Show. We're covering the ins and outs of all things footwear. You can find us at shoeandshow.com. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. I post all the time on LinkedIn. Matt posts all the time on LinkedIn.
Indeed.
So there's a number of channels you can get to us at to let us know what show topics you want us to discuss and cover. If you want to be a guest or you have a guest idea of someone we should have on our show to discuss different topics with, we want to hear from you. So please drop us a line. And of course, if you go to shoeandshow.com, you can look at our full catalog that goes all the way back several years of different industry leaders and experts talking about all sorts of different topics involving the shoe industry. So if you're a shoe lover and you're a lover of business and want to know how the shoe industry functions and works, this is your podcast, Shoe and Show. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, Shoe In is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.